for what is certainly a session that will beat the session before that. You guys don't look excited about this panel. Should we just cancel it? Move forward? Yes. It's an enemy of progress on this side. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this session will be critical and important, but also I want you to put your hat on to imagine not just the Kenyan situation, but the continent, okay? Because many things that will be said here are going to have sort of nexus of perhaps what's happening, as has been said, in West Africa and Senegal. It's perhaps the issues that are down south or in Central Africa and that sort of thing. So please put your hat on for that. But let me introduce my panel. It's a very powerful panel. First, allow me to welcome Diana Ishengo, who's a lawyer and a bold Pan-Africanist feminist leader with over 16 years of experience in governance, policy advocacy, and social accountability. She currently serves as the executive director of the Institute of Social Accountability, that's TISA, convener of the Okoa Uchumi campaign. Thank you. A civil society coalition championing debt, justice, and public finance accountability in Kenya, renowned for her legislative advocacy and public commentary on governance, taxation, and human rights. Diana has led critical reforms in public finance and championed protection for small-scale traders. Her work spans through constitutionalism, economic rights, diversity and inclusion, and movement building. She sits on the board of Aphrodite, chairs the Initiative of Equality and Non-Discrimination, and has previously worked with Amnesty International and Kenya Human Rights Commission, advancing democracy, equality, and the rights of marginalized community. Allow me to welcome Shali Mumbua. Shali Mumbua is a Gen Z, passionate finance enthusiast with practical experience, aspiring to become a finance professional. She has a keen interest in advocating for best practices in public finance management and are very committed to driving sustainable development and impactful change. Next, Mwalimu Mati is a lawyer and governance consultant with over 25 years of work experience in the field of economic governance, anti-corruption research, advocacy and publication. Mwalimu's life mission is to empower citizens to demand accountability by sharing knowledge. And last but not least, Mumbi Kanyogo. Mumbi is a Nairobi-based feminist writer, researcher, and strategist committed to advancing economic and gender justice through strategic communication, advocacy, and movement building. Her research and writing has focused on exploring the political economy of GBV, the histories of domestic work and productive labor in Kenya, movement solidarities. She has been published in African Digital Heritage, Open Democracy, and The Republic, among other publications. And obviously this, you clap for yourself. All right, let's kick this off. I think you can just pass this microphone. Let me start from the other side just to set the stage. And in a minute or less, all right, before you give your real keynote, the Kenyan economy is on a free fall. Why?
Because we elect thieves and they keep stealing and create more avenues to steal. When we stop them, they stage a coup against the citizens.
All right, quite and precise. Right, same question.
I think our economy is going through a free fall because we are also not able to take accountability of the roles we play. It's taking a dive. I think we need to be more aware. We need to start educating ourselves on our problems and finding our own ways to solve them, rather than being dependent on institutions and key players to actually come through for us.
All right, thank you very much. Why is this economy on a free fall?
because we've forgotten the purpose of government is to take care of the people. So you have a situation where you have a government that will do nothing, even though you have close to 6 million youth who are not either employed in education or in training. And the government does nothing to respond to that kind of crisis. In other words, the government of Kenya no longer works for the people. And that's why the economy will continue to be free.
All right, thank you very much. What's your perspective on this?
I think it's a combination of factors. One, we have a deeply unfair international financial system that is structured in order to permanently impoverish countries in the global south. Kenya is not an island, as Alvin was saying. The problems that we're experiencing now also experienced across the whole continent. On the other hand is the fact that particular interests are preferenced over the interests of the masses. We're seeing that, for example, even as consumption taxes are sort of being increased, there's no wealth tax in Kenya. So we really need to be asking the question, who is the economy for? We're not just crunching numbers for the sake of crunching numbers. If the economy is not working for the masses, that's when it's not working.
All right. As you've heard, it's very diverse, but we're agreeing to a central location. There is a system that does not work. I will set the stage with this first video. I don't know if it plays. As you can see, budget betrayal. Let's listen to this clip and then get to our conversation. All right, as we try to fix that.
Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard. The headline this time round focuses on the state of the economy. The headline, going big with budget betrayal, all to do with the cash crunch, where the government is preparing to storm back, blood-stained briefcase in hand, to wring the last drops from a crumbling economy. Budget making has morphed from a duty to serve citizens into a desperate bid for the state's survival. For millions of the poor who are barely hanging on, it's yet another demand to tighten already frayed belts. Last year's finance bill protest cost dozens of young lives, yet the regime, deaf and unshaken, presses on, hell-bent on taxing even the air Kenyans breathe. Details on pages 4, 5 and 6 of Bold newspaper tomorrow. Make sure you grab yourself a copy and find out what the details entail around the 2025-2026 financial year budget.
All right, thank you. Let me start with you, Diana, and I want to ask this question in this format, that there is almost a belief in how we budget, how we run government, and how we think about what happens in this country and perhaps even the continent. Some serious lack of imagination, all right? That things must be done the very same way they were constructed to be done from 1963, if you like. And so our budgeting process, what we pay for in terms of governance, what we think is important as a nation, as a country, hasn't changed. And there's almost unwillingness for anyone to change anything. Talk to me around that as we talk about this question of budget betrayal and the constant need for us to sort of keeping up the show, okay? There is no change. Even when things are not working, but we accept that there's no change. Let's just run things the way they're supposed to run. A president should have 300 policemen. He should live at State House. He should have 1,000 people working for him. The member of parliament should have 10 people working for them. Nothing really changes. Please talk to me around as you give us an overview of what this economic sort of juggernaut that we are trying to put together looks like.
Thanks, James, and hello everyone. Welcome to Kenya. I like to, when I moved from the world of human rights, we have had mainly human rights, diversity, inclusion, democracy, to the world of fiscal justice, where we crack numbers, they speak facts. It's not a world I was used to, and I'll use my experience there to speak to the Kenyan context and how different sectors are affected. And before I speak, just to acknowledge that Davis Malombe, we worked with him on the Shona. He has some white, nice clothes on this as we move to economic justice. Now, as a human rights activist, anytime you hear that people are plotting a massacre to kill people, what would you do? You whistleblow, you write, you get scared, you panic, and so on. So in this country, like has been indicated, since 1963, we've had a problem. We took over all the structures of the colonial state that was very extractive. All the revenue that was collected was supposed to build a ruling class. And that ruling class would only thrive if the masses were extremely poor. So that continued. The Kenyatta regime stole land. The Moi regime came and took over all private corporation. We had a small reset during the NAC Kibaki era. And at that point, our debt stock was about 27%. We were actually rated very happy people as Kenyans. Then we elected 2 inductees of the ICC. And then they had to create new areas for neocolonialism and where to amass new wealth. That was in the world of infrastructure. How do you finance it? You're already doing very well. Our debt to GDP was at 27%. Very, very good. My tutor, one of my tutors, Jeff Hoss, we took all the 27%. So we started borrowing. But how do we borrow as a country? Because we are so used to extracting and our own self-benefit, we usually we have open society from all parts of the world, we usually go to your capitals. We come there and first decide, you're giving us $1 billion US. Yes, of these, we only need 20% to go to Kenya. This is for our campaigns, this is for the bribes, and so on. So the debt that we were acquiring was not getting into our consolidated funds, one, and secondly, it was not being utilized for the right purposes. And this country's civil society started blowing the whistle in 2015. Reports were released showing that we would be where we are, budget betrayal. But people who work on numbers, they just put the numbers. It is coming. We are about to sink. It's coming. Kenyans were a bit lost. So the think tanks that work on the economy, fiscal justice, reached out to people who do campaigns, human rights, digital activism, and so on. And we started voicing the debt problem in 2019. If COVID didn't happen, we were supposed to hit the first iceberg. But COVID happened and we were rescued. We never changed the character. Not so much how we budget, we never changed the character of leadership because Kenya does not have a revenue problem. Our revenue has consistently grown. Anybody here who is not a taxpayer? This is not your conversation. If you have never paid tax, you can. But if you have paid tax, just know all your tax, one, goes to repay debt that is not ours, and secondly, it goes to finance people who want to become oligarchs of different sectors. Now, as a result of that burden of debt, where have we gotten ourselves into? I won't get into the debt numbers because Mwalimu will get into that. It has such a strong spillover effect, we should have seen it coming. The minute you take away human rights activists, please stop fighting for human rights if there are no budgets. Because the government is resourced by tax revenue. So if there is no revenue to finance the right to life, people will surely die. So like our health sector has significantly deteriorated, and with the coming of USAID and them leaving the country, we have no ARVs. we have no family planning because we cannot prioritize it within our budget. We have to wait for grants. We have therefore created a new model, social health insurance fund, where the people with salaries continue to pay very, very high amounts, and the rest you are assessed on a criteria that we are not sure what exactly happened. And as a result, health, which is a devolved function, is almost public health institutions are on the verge of collapse. Let me move to the education sector. Well, under the NAC regime, we introduced free basic primary and free basic education, so primary, secondary for the Kenyan system. And our university model at least had a credit system that we could afford. But based on where we are, our debt levels, education fee has grown on average by 147%. So the students who are in school can no longer, like they have to pay 147% more than what I paid. I'm a millennial, not Gen Z, but I'm sure there are Gen Zs who paid the same amount. Now, let's put it into context. 147% increase, lower government credit or loans for student loans. And then this year, based on the budget betrayal, our government, of their entire loan portfolio that they must borrow, 82% will come from the domestic market. Okay? 82% of all the monies we need to borrow, over $1 trillion, will be borrowed from domestic banks, microfinance institutions. It therefore means all our banks, the only thing they wake up and plan for, insurance agents no longer call me pensioners because I'm not profitable. They only trade with government. So everybody else has no access to credit. If your mother can no longer afford fee, they borrow at very, very high interest rates. Where are we headed? That would be definitely a collapse. The infrastructure, housing, and the dark side of public-private partnership. We do not stop there. Our political class is so, they have an addiction for accumulation of capital for themselves. So how you treat, the experts will tell us, how you treat a country that is in this crisis, you get into public-private partnerships, you privatize some things. But what we do, because we must negotiate, if I am the, and for our visitors, please just enjoy our screen. Yesterday we were treated to a 3-hour thriller by our former deputy president, just exposing the economic dealings that the government has had. We usually deal in your airports, okay? And we are very good. We have a samurai bond. We are about to get a Jetta bond. We deal with your capitals and so on. So our public-private partnership for construction of road infrastructure, right now we are at the National Museum. We have another space, which is a heritage space. It's called the Bomas of Kenya. The Bomas of Kenya is where the Constitution of Kenya was developed. It's very, very beautiful. Right now they're about to build a very mega conferencing and hotel. How the tender was awarded, we don't know. Where we will follow up on our elections, we don't know. Who is going to benefit, we do not know. That is the state of our economy. The youth know it because they live it every day through the sectors that I have highlighted, and others will be mentioned. So, as a result of that, in Kenya, every single active citizen, civil society, sees themselves. James Matia is a journalist. He knows journalists are suffering without revenue, in pending bills, because we can no longer afford to pay our media houses. It also results in a government that can no longer collect tax, so they must force us to collect tax by even attacking bloggers, all spaces of civic space are attacked because of the threat of fiscal constitutionalism. I think that is the state of play, and most probably why the CS Treasury couldn't come in because of a budget betrayal right after we guided him last year on how to do a budget, okay? And barely 10 months, he has forgotten. Do we have the power and the voice and the energy to remind them again how to do a budget? Yes. Do we have the capacity to get it right? Yes. Surely, how can we not have even family planning? We are in serious trouble, but Kenyans and learning from Africans and other areas, we do have solutions, and you will get to hear them today.
Thank you very much, Diana, for painting such a rosy picture. Brilliant. It's very uplifting listening to you. Anyway, as pointed, and I want to come to this, please cue the video on the 1.3 trillion, because the conversation is heading towards something that we've had this consistently, that Kenya does not have a revenue generating problem. Kenya does have a spending problem. We are spendthrift, right? And that question we are unable to answer because the political class and the parasite class, who are the people hanging around politicians, have made it impossible for anyone, until the Gen Z, to ask them specific questions about what to do with the money. But I want to play this first, and I want to come to Molimati. Just listen to this.
There are some issues which are not going right as far as the financial management of our nation is concerned. If it is true that there have been withdrawals which have been money, it means the control budget, Treasury, and Central Bank of Kenya must have sat together to approve some of these money withdrawals. And we cannot manage a nation if we are not getting our act as far as financial management of Kenya is concerned. It must be managed in the most prudent manner possible. We want to go deeper to understand where was control budget, Treasury, Central Bank of Kenya, as far as 1.3 trillion withdrawal within 7 months are concerned.
All right. Thanks. But with this, to set the stage, I cannot remember any single, and Dan has mentioned this, any single transaction or deal or contract that this government has negotiated or even mooted that did not have something that was amiss with it. Half the time, everything is complete amiss with it. All right? And this is the second government. It's almost like a sequence since 2013 of a governance structure that is clearly broken. That the things you hear that the head of state has done, the CS has done, or government officials have done, they're just completely unmanageable. Talk to me about the institutionalization and the collapse of just how institutionalized things work, but most importantly, just how corruption has permeated the society.
Well, I too had hoped that the Minister of Finance would come today. He's actually an old friend of ours, but we now have some very serious questions about whether he's still a good friend to the Kenyan people because of the way that he's running the Treasury. Is back to a very sort of uncaring, unfeeling style of managing public finances. And we can trace all this to, we had a new constitution in 2010, that's true. But we also had a political class that had been dragged to that point of accepting a new, more accountable, transparent, and democratic system against their will. The people are the ones who brought the constitution, not despite what we're told by many opposition politicians. It was the people who ultimately voted in that referendum. They made choices on a draft that was circulated, and it required a public financial management system that had several players, chief amongst them being the public. We're meant to start with the public. So before you go into budgeting and procuring, you should probably be asking the public what it is that they want done in a particular year, giving them the opportunity to participate in the decision making, the priority setting was written into the Constitution. Parliament was meant to be the budget making institution, so you'd have committees, again, taking the views of the public and deciding to set budgets for health, education, social spending, national defense and everything, but always in a people-centered way. But that is broken down. What we've observed is that the two successive presidents under the new constitution have dominated parliament to the extent that it now is just an extension of their political party. And in fact, in this current situation, we've had two successive instances where the opposition and the ruling party have formed a coalition for political stability. But it's as if they forget that they are actually meant to be checking each other on behalf of their voters. So here we've lost Parliament. The people are not asked to participate in the making of the budget. It's done by mandarins in the Treasury. That's how you end up with 1.5. That's how you end up with a national budget where people are withdrawing in cash in a year 1.3 trillion shillings outside the computerized IFMIS system. So they try to avoid. So you've got misconduct on a scale that hasn't been seen for a long time, but Parliament is not asking the questions. You ask where is the controller and auditor, the control of budget. She's there. Every quarter she publishes a report, but you see she is tracking the heist in real time, but only after the heist has happened. She can't. She's actually had the indignity of once being threatened that if you don't authorize, transfers of money to some foreign company, in the next 15 minutes, the president himself is going to call you and ask what's going on. And that happened in the last week of Uhuru Kenyatta's government. I think they transferred about 20 billion shillings in 15 minutes because of direct threats being made by the former finance minister to the controller of budget. The Auditor General also does an excellent job, but she tends to be 2 to 3 years behind. So by the time you are actually reading her report, the crooks have a 2 to 3 year head start with your money. And so the other institutions that ought to check misconduct in public life and over public money, like the Anti-Corruption Commission, fairly discredited. The Kenyan public doesn't believe in the Anti-Corruption Commission anymore. If we did a study where we found that the number of cases being reported to the Anti-Corruption Commission by the public never exceeds more than 2,000 reports a year. And corruption in Kenya is as endemic as we believe it is. Surely there should be far more. So you've lost the institutions that could have checked government, the central government or the national government, and you've got a situation now where what you're describing probably is true. That how do you get out of this? That really is the question. I think when the Gen Zs stormed Parliament and really shook this country in a way that they were asking for accountability for public money, they were asking for less corruption, and they were asking to be enabled to participate. Their cause was probably one of the most popular causes I've ever encountered in terms of automatic public support for them. In the past, we have a fairly conservative older population, the boomers, I suppose is what we are called. But you would find that street protest was objected to by a fairly significant number of people who were in trade because they didn't want to close their shops in support of a popular cause. But the Gen Z's got the support of their parents and their grandparents and their older brothers and sisters on a scale which suggests to me that we're about to turn the corner. We've got the opportunity, if we are organized, to put the accumulated knowledge of the Kenyan civil society and the professional societies into the hands of the active population of Kenya, which is the Gen Z. They have a grievance, they have a legitimate grievance. As I was saying earlier, they are about 17 million of our population. That's just under a third or thereabouts. But 6 million of that 17 million sector are completely unengaged in education or training or employment. They've been cast aside. That is the army that will bring accountability to the manifestos of the next general election. So my forecasting is that this system, a 60-year-old system, which has created an oligarchy, is on its last legs. It doesn't have legitimacy anymore, and certainly it doesn't have the revenue to continue. So the big idea, perhaps, is what I'm saying here, is that the time now to push for an active political movement to decisively defeat the existing political elite at the next election, the time has come.
Who does the pushing?
The people, we the people.
All right, the people shall. Let's just go to Shali. The mentions of Gen Z and what happened in June last year continue to be the sort of the anchor of this first time a popular sort of pushback against, government. And we saw the political class running, helter-skelter. They have no idea how to respond to young people and the calls in the young people and how articulate the young people are to the question. So it's not just a question of this thing does not work, but in specific questions on how they are unable to understand the strategy today is very clear. I want to talk to us around what is this important thing that young people need to do and should think as we move forward to this next budgeting process, but looking forward to what 2 years from now the election will look like.
All right, good question. So let's talk about the protests that we witnessed last year. As amazing as they may have been in the aspect of people power, they were gruesome. Mothers lost their children, people lost sisters and brothers, it was nasty. So I tend to want to ask my fellow youth, do you think that we are the first generation to pump our fists in the air and say we want change? Do you think so? We're not, right? Then what are we doing? We're using all tactics for new challenges. It's about time that we change our approach with what we want to see. And it will start with us being smart. Brute strength is going to end us, literally. We will end, because do we have any defense to us when we go outside on those streets to advocate for our needs? We don't. We are the recipients of live bullets and harassment. So we need to actually verse ourselves with policy fluency. We need to actually be very present and see what the problems need actively, not just in a protesting aspect, right? And sometimes I actually don't blame the youth when they protest, because at the end of the day, foundation is very important, right? And let's look at our education system, pardon me. Our education system teaches us what to think, not how to think. It upholds the nature of memorization, not teaching us critical skills, analytical skills, entrepreneurial skills, which are very, very much in demand in today's market and today's economy. So what happens? Are we still going to use our bare chest to go approach things that demand our minds? No. So for my youth, I say, let us place ourselves in the decision-making structures, and not just as glorified observers, but as participants with real agency, because this is our future. The future is not waiting for us to grow up, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we are the future adults. Do you know how scary it is to imagine, oh my days, this is how the economy looks like. I'm about to be a mother. Where will I get the fee? How am I going to keep a roof above my child's head? Sustain their lives, give them the best. How is that going to happen with an economy like this? It starts with me being brilliant, with me understanding, hey, this is a policy. I need to participate. I need to tell my homies, pull up. There's nothing cute about this. Talk. Enter, infiltrate the spaces. Because there's no time for us. No one is coming to save us. And so, especially when you talk about unemployment. Unemployment is a heartbreaking thing to witness, because you know most of the brilliant men out here with first class honors are tamaki. How is that possible? And when the youth demand for the right to actually lead the economic transformation, there's a very aggravating question that rises that is laced with a very fake sense of akiwoye, for lack of a better word. The question is, the young people, do they have enough experience to actually lead something? And you see, that right there is the problem. Because look at the offices in the fields, they're saturated with experience, right? Experience we need it. But the gap is in innovation. Because how do we have all this experience but we're still stuck in the same problems? The gap is not being filled, and the youth, the brilliant minds that are found in our lecture halls, in the studio apartments, in rural towns, who are wallowing away with their intelligence, they are the untapped national capital. And so stop saying that the youth are inexperienced. You're experienced, but you're not doing so much for us. You're dragging us years back. I speak as an angry Gen Z, obviously, as you can tell, but also as a Gen Z who is bold to dream, and bold enough to say it's enough for us to keep on fighting a losing war. The Swahilis walisema ukishindana na ndovu utafanya? Exactly. Utapasuka. And it's premature deaths are not our portion, amen? So we have to live and be strategic to approach things, and let us not wait for us to be invited to these rooms, to these spaces, for our voices to be heard. Let us create our own tables, our own institutions, our own architecture that are centered on innovation, ethics, and equity, because we will not be inheriting a broken nation quietly. Thank you.
Excellent. I want to stay with the question of young people because another young person is going to speak. But I want to play this clip first. And just want to listen to this for a minute and to layer this question before I go to moving.
The Gen Z, some who actually formed the base of your election campaign, are telling you, we are disappointed, you've not delivered. Hashtag Ruto must go. What do you tell them?
Let me tell them the following. Good friends, young people of our nation, my sons and daughters, who supported me to win the election. I hear you. In fact, I think it was on your headline, a gentleman from my village who was saying, the president has let us down. Many children in this village are not getting jobs locally. That is why they are going abroad. Little did he know, my good friend from my village, that the children, the 500 of his colleagues around our village, are actually part of my plan on export of labor. I intentionally supported them to leave the country because we got them jobs outside Kenya. So I am telling the young people of our nation to be patient. Our housing program is rolling. We will be hiring more architects, we will be hiring more engineers, we will be hiring more professionals to support our housing program. in the next 2 years, we will have 300, maybe 1,000 people working in that space.
All right, let's calm down. It's serious matters here. I want Mumbi to react to this particular claim, but there's certain things. Two things. One, the export of labor. It's a very important thing for this government that there are no jobs here, so what we'll do, we'll ship you out of this country consistently and take you to Dubai and everywhere else where they need you for menial jobs. That's very clear, that's very important. Two, you need to do other menial jobs in housing where we're building and doing all those things. So the things that Shad was talking about, how first class orders, the creativity and the talent and creation and being on the table is not what is being considered. I want to react to that, please.
So I think what Ruto doesn't do in that video is speak to how we got the unemployment, the mass unemployment crisis to begin with. This country is a rural country. It's really generated and moved forward by smallholder farmers. Most of the food that we eat on our tables is from people who are farming in order to feed their families, and the surplus is what is landing up on our tables. And what we've seen in rural areas is a situation of mass dispossession. People are being subject to, because of austerity, for example, that's been created by debt servicing. So this situation where the state has reduced the amount of spending on social goods. So for example, in rural areas, this might be reduction in spending on extension services. It might be reduction in spending on irrigation, for example. This status quo has created a situation in which the majority of this country is not able to continue within their livelihoods, the places where there's actually space for productivity. And so what you have is a state that is sort of scared and has anxieties about youth. I'm sure you've all had the discourses of youth bulge, right? And youth bulge actually has a very deep colonial history. It's about fear, about what it means for black men to be unemployed, and the sort of anxious idea that if they're not employed, then they will sort of burst into violence and harm sort of our ruling classes. We have to remember where that comes from and where this specific anxiety comes from. And so what we have is a state that is reacting, not thinking about what it means to build long-term industry, which really means supporting existing livelihoods, and instead trying to quickly displace populations, whether it's into employment in service sector jobs here in Nairobi, which we're seeing are increasingly not actually giving people enough to survive. So whereas people were able to survive based on the food that they were creating and farming on their farms in rural areas, we're increasingly seeing young people shuttled into urban areas, into sort of downstream retail jobs that are not creating enough income for people to survive. And then on the flip side, we're seeing also the sort of the shutting of young people into jobs in the Gulf, where at the end of the day, people are not being paid enough. So for example, the average sort of income is 20,000 shillings. And at the same time, Kenyans are receiving body bags because of the type of violence that they encounter in the workplace elsewhere. So what we're seeing is reactive policy making in order to generate employment, which is not about creating dignified jobs, but is instead about allaying this anxiety about what it means to have a young, empowered youth who don't have jobs or don't have livelihoods as a result of this dispossession that's happened in rural areas.
All right, that's the right panel, please. Mumbi. So I want to, because this question wasn't just a panel, I want to get the microphone to you. But I want to think about two things. One, the performative politics that layers what happens with the economy, and this is essentially what happens. And Mwalimu has, sort of touched on it. The Constitution of 2010 was a thing that the public had been yearning for years. So the political class essentially get into it, kicking and screaming and just simply agreeing because it was a good political moment. But there was no intention of doing anything with that constitution. So, in effect, as soon as that constitution was enacted, the sort of unraveling of the republic started. And the economic stagnation, if you like, is a constant idea by the political class to make sure that they take as much from this republic that you think you own so that they can own you, all right? So I want you to talk, as you think about it, talk about the politics that we have instituted and how we like performers, you know, the people who are rowdy and goons and who sort of give us this confidence, in a sense, that they know what they're doing, this is what we vote for. But then I want to make that connection with what happens with the economy when you put people like that in power, because that has been mentioned in different spaces. So I want to get your questions, your thoughts, but most importantly, how do we unravel those two things? What happens to our politics and our economy in the same set? Questions, please, or thoughts? Going once? All right, then you, then you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Nyamisa, and first of all, I'd want to thank the panel for great insights. And I had a thought about something that was said earlier that I feel like I disagree with. When we say that Kenya has a spending problem, it sounds like it's all of us who have a spending problem. And the reality is, it's a few people who, I think it's less than 1,000 people out of the 50 million of us who are spending this money. So we have leaders who are greedy and they're misappropriating our money. The rest of us are broke, unless you guys have money. You guys have money? I don't. So I'd like to disagree with that, because words have meaning, and when we say Kenyans have a spending problem, the rest of us don't have a spending problem. We have leaders who are greedy and they're thieves.
All right. The gentleman? Yes.
Good morning. My name is Arthur Pono.
Could you put the microphone just close to the mouth?
Hello. My name is Arthur Pono, and I have noted a few things. Well, let me say that we achieved political stability when the ruling party in government formed an alliance with the opposition. What does that mean for us? When we had the protests and when we had that alliance, we saw that the intensity of the protests went down. What does that mean for us? That means that there is a section of Kenyans who are led by a certain majority. And that means we cannot have any sort of progress if certain issues are not addressed. This comes from a point of some places being historically marginalized. So whatever the purpose to move forward without addressing certain issues will never come into play. That's one thing we have to really understand. And when Shadi spoke about policy fluency and innovation, that is true. When we talk about bringing manufacturing, bringing jobs, developing instances where we can be able to be self-sufficient, well, the truth is in most manufacturing jobs, robots do them right now in the modern world. And if we want to be able to bring manufacturing jobs, then we have to have instances where we encourage innovation in various fields. Now, Madam here spoke about accountability and the spending problem. The thing is, the accountability problem that we try to speak about not only applies to the leaders, but also applies to the Kenyans. You see, these leaders are not there by default. We may have a problem with the electoral system, but you know what? Even the legislators at the machinery level are pieces of shit. So with that being said, what does that mean about the country's landscape or what we choose for ourselves? Well, why do we expect accountability from people when we're not accountable for what we choose for ourselves? And so my parting shot is, if we want to move forward, then we have to become policy. We have to be fluent in policies. We have to be smart about it, because we can't pump our fists in the air forever.
Ada, can I just push you back for a second? Yes. Let's get your thoughts. One, how did those people get into office?
They were elected
All right, but
by the people.
yeah.
The registered voters.
Did you vote in the last election?
I did.
All right. I'm not going to ask you for your choice, but are you happy with the choice that you made in that last election from this MCA, MP, Senator, Governor, President?
I am satisfied with a couple of the leaders.
Right.
But my preferred presidential candidate didn't make it, so I have no answer for that.
All right. Thank you for your French. Please.
Thank you to the panel for the insightful discussion. Some of them are a bit stressful. Let's see. My name is Tuku Buru. I work with the International Commission of Jurists. And maybe Diana, as you are speaking, you say, quote unquote, politicians have become innovative even in the way they are stealing. And also, just to put this into context, Ayn Rand, a Russian-American writer and philosopher, says that in a country where in order to produce, you have to ask for permission to those who produce nothing. In a country where money flows to those who deal not in goods, but in favors. In a country where corruption is rewarded and self-sacrifice and honesty is seen as self-sacrifice, then you truly know you are doomed. And in that innovation, Kenya politicians have budgeted corruption into our budget. So my question is, how do we dismantle budgeted corruption in Kenya? And maybe, and to Shadi, you speak very wonderfully of the dreams deferred. And Langston Hughes says, what happens to a dream deferred? And Martin Luther in one of his speeches answers and says, it boils and becomes bewildered frustration. And then the language of the youth become protests. And that is why we are going to the streets to demand for these things that we were promised, this rosy future that people are talking about. Maybe you can tell us more. How do we remain militant yet non-violent? And to Akili, what can be done about our justice system? How do we prosecute corruption and economic crimes in Kenya? Thank you.
Dogo, just one question for you. Do you think the young people in June were violent? Did you see young people being violent?
They were frustrated.
All right.
Yes.
But were they being violent?
They were frustrated.
Were they being violent?
The police were violent.
Thank you. All right. Okay, yes, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to OSF and the panel. I just wanted, because I don't think it's coming out clearly enough, particularly for people who aren't familiar with this country. I wanted it to come out more clearly. Diana alluded to some of the things, so did Mwalimu, so did all the panelists. But we, I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Gladwell Otieno. I work with the Africa Center for Open Governance, AFRICOG for short. And for years we've been working on issues of corruption, capture, etc. And I think we really need it to come out very clearly that what we are dealing with here is a situation of state capture by a criminal gang, yeah? Yes. This is a system of virtually organized criminal syndicate. And these things are not happening by accident. When Diana is saying how come they go to the capitals of the world, most recently their favorite destination is, the Gulf, and they get money, that money never enters our country. It doesn't enter the consolidated fund. The Auditor General can do nothing about money which is not in the consolidated fund. How did that happen? We talked about Parliament being turned into the lapdog of the executive. We talked about the opposition colluding with the I don't know what to call them, I don't want to call them ruling or governing, the party that supposedly won the elections and thereby hangs another tale. Yeah, so we talked about that, and I want to hear about the deliberate moves to amend laws, legislative corruption, which allowed this to happen, where money could be exchanged between parties which the Kenyan people don't know, never enter this country, and still have to be repaid. we were asked about our elections and are we happy with who we voted for. Let me tell you something. The quality of Kenya's elections is such that there are no elections. We do not have elections in this country. Yeah? People line up for hours to vote. Nobody's really asking. Okay? So I really want that to come out. We talk about budgeted corruption, how money is not stolen from a project which was planned in the budget, but the money is put deliberately into the budget in order to be stolen. We need to understand that we are dealing with a very well-organized clique who have managed to capture this country for the last 60 years. And yes, we have a chance to turn things around. And yes, the rotting corpse of this system can keep on. They can win the next elections. If we allow ourselves to be fragmented, to be looking at, oh, my favorite candidate didn't win. It's not about one candidate. It's about a whole entire system which we have to unite and to think carefully about how we're going to get rid of it and not be fooled by, oh, I like the senator, this one, and oh, I like what that one said. It's not about individuals, it's about getting rid of a whole entire system and finally getting the Constitution to function as it should. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ladwa. Can we go to this side, please? If you could make your comments much shorter, then we can be able to take as much as possible because this is important.
Well, I don't think there's a problem, but it's okay. So the first question you asked, hello James. I think I stood so that you can hear my voice. Because you're famous. Thank you. I'm Lilian. The first question that we asked the panel, why we seem to be going under, I would say be more academic, apart from corruption and bad leadership choices and everything. I would say the Keynesian economic models, the Milton Friedmans, can only last as long. I think they are beginning to tumble, not just in Kenya, world over. So I believe the economic principles of the past and the present are the problem, and they need to be revised globally so that our economy starts to be humanistic, starts having a human face. They were good as much before the 1940s and up to now, because up to the 2000s, because the global population, of course, was lower and the opportunity was there. But right now, they seem not to be expanding to accommodate everyone. So I think there needs to be a revision of that, so that we have more social kind of. I always dream in my mind having a system that combines all models of economy: capitalism, communism, socialism, and the Marxism. I always believe should go around like that. Then our constitutions are failing world over. Again, I repeat, because I'm always on Twitter. Sorry. So they are failed. That they crafted a good economic system and leadership system. They say democracy is the best so far, but the constitutions fail to check against oligarchy and politicians' power. That is the problem. Because how can one man sink a country of 52 million people so fast within 6 months? How powerful is this person? Why can't you remove this person? Plus the parliamentarians that he came with. How powerful are these people? So our constitutions fail to counter that. They say there's a process, the parliament can do a vote of no confidence, but it seems the man at the top, which is mostly a man, it's not enough. We need people power. We need ways of giving a vote of no confidence, because I don't believe also people should be going to the streets so that are murdered by the army, which always against supports the big man, which is diabolical. And I don't think people should shed blood so that one man, and a group of parliamentarians can come up.
All right,
So,
may I ask just 1 second?
Yes.
I want to have to go to the next one because there's many questions. How do we do that? What you just said, how do we do that?
I think it should be collective.
How?
I don't know. We have relied on goodwill for long. We always rely on having a good president. That's it. If you have a bad president, you're done. There's nothing you can do about it. So I don't know if goodwill will work going forward.
Okay.
Then let me finish, please.
30 seconds.
Okay. So then the other thing that could be killing Kenya in particular now is a bad constitution. Somebody said online that our constitution, the current one we have, looks like it was written by a grown person or a child. I mean children. They could write a better constitution.
All right.
When we added it up, added 47 governments, it was bound to fail because I also believe that 47 governments are sapping a lot of money.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you
Yes,
very much.
thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm Nick Hill. I work for Open Society Foundations, and I've worked on economic justice issues across South Asia for many years. And what strikes me is the conversation we're having here is actually very similar to the conversations we had in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan. And we focused on the way we started framing those conversations in South Asia is actually we're between a rock and a hard place. We have a domestic corruption problem rooted in the political capture of institutions. But internationally, we have a broken financial system. And Sri Lanka now has a very progressive government. Muhammad Yunus is now in Bangladesh, but they're struggling economically. And so what I wonder is, last week we had a rewriting of the international financial order. The country which actually wrote the rules and refereed the rules has now kicked the table away and completely changed things. And we haven't actually mentioned this because we're so focused on the issue that we can touch, that we can feel, and it's the domestic issue. So I guess my question to the panel is, how do we also make space to make sense of what's happening globally? Because we have that to crack that out a little bit. Thank you.
All right. Let's deal with that. That's quite a bit. Diana, this as quickly as we can, yeah, so that we don't spend a really lot of time. Let's take 2 minutes or less.
Okay, and thank you, Mikel, for raising that. Definitely, we speak to what we see, and our domestic problem is quite significant. But we can't, and it's good to hear you're from Sri Lanka. Solidarity is needed. We are coming to you guys for lessons. Here in Kenya, we are definitely subjects of the broken financial system, significantly. Kenya has just finished its an IMF. No, we have vacated an IMF program. We couldn't do the final review because all targets were not met. Kenya is an interesting country because the people spoke, and we've done everything. We've bombed the IMF email, we've done hashtags for them, and we've written directly. But when IMF was feeling cozy with government, that government was taking in their conditionalities and they were not looking at the areas that were broken, they completely ignored the people and civil society. Now, the government realized this system is broken and their conditionalities are becoming very, very expensive. We are not ready to be accountable. In Kenya, the IMF is now reaching out to citizens to tell them, help us get compliance. We are in the middle of a governance diagnostic, and how we view the governance diagnostic is part of getting accountability for the international financial institution, that system and how broken it is, and also for the Kenyan accountability. What happened in this country in 2024, there has been no space for us to ventilate and lay our demands formally. So that feels like one of them. The fact that America has removed the table, I'll go back to you. I am wondering, will they withdraw from the World Bank, their veto and everything? Kenya demanded a governance diagnostic. But the US government was at their door in State House. You must demand a governance diagnostic. Now that the US has pulled out, where do we stand with that? I think it's time to recreate. And for me, the international financial institutions must be linked with other values and other systems, from human rights and so on. World Bank tries. IMF and human rights, they say it's about balance of payments. So we are trying to go into that space, but we'll be appealing for solidarity from countries that know how broken that system is, but also for capitals that are the shareholders of IMF and World Bank. Speak to your government. They are the ones that are driving this particular oppression, violation of human rights. And we are looking into ways of partners who can help us. We hope to sue, especially in the UK, Germany, Brussels, anybody who is a shareholder and has a functional rule of law. Let us drive that accountability and see if we can do away with the table and create a mat.
Right.
Just a mat that we can mesh the
Question
IFI.
is it possible that Kenya or other African countries can figure out ways on how not to pay monies that came here or didn't come here, as Gladys has said, that remained there? So these international, institutions, they participate in that corruption. We're not obligated to pay it if the money did not come to us. Is it possible for us to refuse to pay that?
Yes, it is possible to refuse, and we must refuse. And we must refuse to pay. Whenever the international financial institutions come, they come to cater. They don't care about the domestic problems. They come to make sure we pay the foreign creditors. Now, the UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade Agreements, has a principle that lenders must do due diligence. If you send your money to an account in a different country and not Kenya, we don't owe you. We don't owe you. And let's remember, how did they acquire that capital that they keep lending us? They extracted our natural resources. So I think if all African countries, Latin America, Asia, all of us refused. But our oligarchs are nurtured by that particular process. The money laundering happens in those capitals. So we must come together and create a movement of saying no. The only complex thing is they are in the forms of now even bonds. But if those bonds were issued in your country and you didn't do your due diligence, and right now countries are issuing governance bonds, and you're issuing money laundering bonds, we will refuse. It's against us, the sovereign. So let's create the necessary documentation. You said the intellectual work, right there, we will give you fodder to start it's called what? We can't be auctioned. They can't auction us. They can't. Yeah, Sankara already told us. You can't pay debt when your people are dying. And for the Kenyan constitution, how our public finance principles are drafted, it starts with the national interest, the debt. Right now, the national interest is to make sure our education system works, our health, or is debt above education? Is repaying debt above ensuring Kenyans are educated? Is paying debt above ensuring we have free healthcare? Is repaying debt above ensuring we have agricultural extension services and proper free fertilizer? We must default.
You didn't hear her. We must default. Charlie, a minute or less. Where else do you feel, because it's been asked I think by two people, that you suggested that young people should not go to the streets, young people should, where else, how else can this work that needs to be done, that they will speak in this panel, will go to everywhere else, but not be listened to? until we show up in the streets. How else can that be done?
Good question. So you're asking where else? So basically you're asking me the spaces that the youths can occupy, right? Well, I can assure you the streets ain't one of them. It is. The answer says it is. But I agree to disagree, having had seen the gruesome news last year. As I answer your question, let me answer this young gent's question. You asked how we as a youth can be militant and non-violent. First of all, we're not violent. We're very loud, but not violent. But let me ask you, you look like a young person. Have you played video games before? Yeah? Okay. Just in case. Teamwork. Unity is a very key thing in this conversation. Like the stats in our country say we are 75% of this population, right? That's a massive number. But can you imagine all of us doing the same thing? We're progressing backwards. So teamwork, how? Some people are great when it comes to brute strength and just shoving down insults at the opposition. Let them do that. Because it's necessary at the end of the day, because intimidation tactics are also used on us, right? But then at the same time, as there are people who are using brute strength on us, we are playing checkers when people are playing chess. They're using brain power, not manpower. And that is what I'm mostly emphasizing on. How does that work? We need to be proactive. He's asking, if not the streets, where? I like Twitter so much, and I like how Twitter is used in our country. Gen Zs, we are called serial tweeters. And we'll take it, but put that hashtag as tunatweet to Kijenga. We're going to use our social media platforms to destructure all the structures that are currently taking us backwards. Participation. Let me ask you, all the young people in this place, our country holds public participation forums to discuss about the policies, our budget, so much. How many of us attend them? We have a beautiful hand here, another there, out of the entire room, and most of you all are youths. You're not actively participating in the things that directly affect you. But when they're enacted, then you have a problem. But when it came down to the actual work of you participating, you weren't present. Be present, participate, raise your voices, learn how to advocate, all right? And demand for the creation and the conversation and enactment of youth-centered frameworks. And make it very clear that you're not interested in youth-centered headlines like we see. The other thing is, as we've been aware, oligarchy. Oligarchy is the bane of our country, right? Just small people running everything, closing the doors for everyone, and the frustration that comes when the majority are economically locked out. The doors are not going to open. The doors are not going to open. Do I have the solution today on what we can actively do to open the doors? No, I don't. I'm still a youth trying to figure it out. But what I do know is that me and the rest of the youth in this country, we are so many to build up something entirely different that can sustain us and actually improve and secure the future of the future generations that will come after us. I hope that answers your question sufficiently.
Thank you. What we wanted is a question of state capture, but also budgeted corruption, which sort of comes together. But just paint the picture of how severe this problem is, and how, then to Gladwell's point, how do you take out the entire system?
So we go back to the Constitution. So you say that in 2010, Kenyans said that they wanted Parliament to approve borrowing in advance of borrowing. So that the executive needed to borrow would have to run it through the budget and then get parliamentary approval. The second principle was that all money borrowed abroad, all external debt, had to be banked into the Kenyan Consolidated Fund, which is in Kenya. We don't have branches of our central bank abroad that are taking deposits of loan proceeds. But to show you the scale of the problem, in 2014, the executive managed to get Parliament to pass an amendment to the Public Finance Management Act, which purported to allow the Minister of Finance to on certain loans to bank the proceeds abroad. The conditions that they wanted to satisfy them is they were planning to borrow, I think, the $600 million bond in the United States to repay an earlier syndicated loan that was expiring. But greed got a hold of them, as it always will, and they ended up borrowing $2 billion. They went to the market for $600 million and took $2 billion. $1 billion, half of that money never got back to Kenya. It disappeared. There's no records of what happened to it, because it became a stealing spree. It's quite sad. Now, the root of that sad event is that Parliament, the National Assembly, actually created a law to try and get around the constitutional requirements that Kenya's all revenue, including loans, must go through the central bank in the consolidated fund within the country. So that's just an example. Budgeted corruption has been seen in massive dam projects. Rare and Aror is a well-known instance. I mean, there are schemes to sort of privatize public assets like our airport, claiming to be given a 31-year lease to an Indian company that was allegedly going to rebuild the airport, but wouldn't start rebuilding for 12 years. So they collect revenues for 12 years for free. All of these are those, and all of these are supported by parliamentary approvals. So legislative corruption enables state capture. Now, in terms of international solidarity, maybe I was just thinking that the Open Society Foundations has partners around the world. So if we're going to address new policy, new global policy being set primarily out of Washington initially, and then Europe, there are certain things that the international anti-corruption architecture required. We needed the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act to prevent the African and even American kleptocrats from from having impunity by banking their funds abroad. Now, FCPA is gone. We fear that the same might happen to its equivalent from Europe, the OECD, and Asia. We don't want to go back to the early 1990s when the World Bank and the IMF were saying corruption is just a political problem. I mean, it's up to you to solve the problems. It's a developmental problem, and actually it's a financial crime. So the IMF should be very concerned. So I would urge the OSF in its next meeting of partners to consider starting to target the defense of those elements of the international architecture that actually were helpful to Africa. So not all parts of the international financial architecture were good for us, but I think certainly the FCPA would be a very important thing to defend. I don't want to go on because I think people have been here.
All right, yes, thanks. You have to handle the final question, which is, I think, from Mokondo, about the question about the political stability being guaranteed by the handshake. And so we have to sort of make peace with how our politics essentially works.
This is a tough question to answer. I might defer it, but answer a different question. I wanted to point to this idea of us having the need to change the ideology that's shaping our development direction. I think when we're talking about why the state is so intent on debt servicing at all costs, so this idea that we will debt service and at the same time we will collect and increase taxes, while at the same time ensuring that out of every 10 shillings, 6 shillings are going towards debt servicing, as opposed to education and health, is because of the fact that our development is focused on being growth-driven. And I had spoken earlier about this idea of dispossession of land and those factors. when we are in a situation where we're having a growth-driven development, it means that the interests of everyday people, the people who are farmers, the people who are small traders, are not at the center of our economic model. It means that, for example, in rural areas, it's commercial interests which will take center stage. It means that the sort of bottom line of oligarchs are what is going to take center stage. So we really do need to revise the sort of economic assumptions that ensure that we're pursuing debt servicing at the expense of everyday people's conditions. So the last thing I really wanted to talk on is this idea of spending and the fact that we have generalized ideas of spending. I think we really need to remember that this is not the first time we've entered this situation. In the 1990s, we had structural adjustment programs, and we saw the deep levels of poverty that it sunk Kenya into. The last, we're seeing sort of like the statistics of how poverty has actually increased at the same time that growth has increased. I'll say that again. Poverty in Kenya has increased at the same time that economic growth has increased. So we really need to challenge this assumption that growth automatically leads to development and improved outcomes for the everyday people. And I think that goes to that question of questioning the ideology that is at the center of development in this country.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for the panel, please. And for yourselves, I'd like to hand it back to Alvin. That will do it for us. Thank you very much for your questions and your attentiveness, and most importantly, the engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, once again, put your hands together for this very, very brilliant panel. We promised, did we deliver?